Hey everybody, I'm Michael Monaco.
And I'm Bobby Salveson, and we are the Hazmat Guys, bringing you the knowledge and insight to make your job a little bit easier and safer. But before today's show, let's listen to our sponsors. Hey guys, did you know that CBRNE Convergence is heading back to Orlando from the 6th to the 8th of November 2018, bringing you 3 days of workshops, lectures, and interactive sessions delivered by speakers from around the world on the latest issues and approaches to CBRNE and Hazmat. This year's pre-conference workshop is on mass fatalities, a must for first responders. To register for the visits, go to cbrneworld.com/convergence2018. Hey guys, you've heard us talk about Dahlgren Decon and its effectiveness on fentanyl, chemical warfare agents, and ticks and TIMs. Firstline Technology has launched a new Decon field guide app for your iPhone and Android device. It has a complete threat library and explains Dahlgren Decon functionality against bulk contamination and contaminated surfaces. It also has complete instructions for mixing and applying Dahlgren Decon, as well as reactivity concerns, suggested ratios, and dwell times. Download today on the Apple App Store and coming soon to Android. Hey everybody, we have a great episode coming up today, but before we start the show, we want to share some exciting news from the Hazmat Guys. As some of you may know, we have been working on a hazmat drill book for quite some time, and we're pleased to announce that it is finally available on Amazon. This book was written by contributors from the hazmat community based all around the United States, and we think it will provide a ton of value for both you and your department. The title of the book is The National Emergency Response Hazmat Drills, 50 Drills to Improve Your Team, better known as NERD. No, this was not a mistake. Anyway, the goal of the book has been to help the hazmat community, and we hope that you'll take a moment to check it out and share it. We have the link in the show notes, and if you have a moment, please leave us a positive review in Amazon. We'd be very grateful. We wanted to get NERD on the bestseller list and give more exposure to our community. Again, the book is called National Emergency Response Hazmat Drills, 50 Drills to Improve Your Team, and there's both a paperback and Kindle version available. Thank you, everybody.
Now let's get into the show.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Hazmat Guys. I'm Michael Monaco, and today we are going to be doing a hot wash. Today's hot wash was brought to us by an anonymous firefighter out in the Midwest. The only thing I will say is that the city is large enough to at least have a high rise, because that is kind of where this takes place. As with all of our anonymous hot washes, I interviewed him, took notes, and I am relaying the story to you as a third party. So if it sounds like sometimes I am reading text, it is. I'm not taking this from memory. I'm taking this from notes that I have done. So kind of an interesting run when I was speaking with him, and it is a little twist on a very common run that a lot of places have, and that is the mixture of chlorine chemicals for a pool. Not that we're talking about like chlorine as in chlorine gas per se, like a 1-ton container, but we are talking about chlorine in the sense of a byproduct of chemicals being mixed. And that's actually exactly what happened. So I'll tell you how it came over. It came over as, what does he say? It said, chlorine smell coming from a pool. This was how the run came over to them. And it turned out to be on the 4th floor of a high-rise building. So there was, I guess, one of these high-rise buildings that had a pool in it. They had a mechanical room from the story that he gave me. And within this mechanical room, they had accidentally mixed 2 chemicals together. The 2 chemicals were sodium hypochlorite, which is the common term when we say chlorine, or when the public says chlorine and they're talking about pools. This is generally what they're talking about, right? They're talking about sodium hypochlorite. So a really good, just right off the bat takeaway from this is that, when somebody says, hey, I mixed chlorine and so, just double check that it is actually what they're saying it is, right? Because the public also often has different terms for the different things that they use. Pool shock is a perfect example. People would say, I'm putting chlorine in the pool, and they're not. They're putting a sodium hypochlorite or some kind of a solution like that. So anyway, this ended up being an oxidation reaction. in a 55-gallon drum, there was muriatic acid, about 5 gallons of muriatic acid mixed with about 10 gallons of sodium hypochlorite or bleach. And that caused your basic redox reduction oxidation reaction. So before I go on, I just want to run through a quick couple things about this reaction, and then we'll kind of get into how they responded, what they saw, what they did, and some lessons learned in this whole thing. So real quick, when you have sodium hypochlorite and you mix it with muriatic acid or hydrochloric acid, muriatic acid is the lesser strength or concentration to hydrochloric acid. So if you hear muriatic acid, that's the same as HCl. It produces an intermediate chemical, HClO, which is extraordinarily unstable, and it breaks down to eventually form chlorine gas. So the byproduct of this reaction actually is chlorine gas, and it's the same chlorine gas that you would have in a 1-ton cylinder. The big difference is the quantity involved. So this chemical reaction, it's not like it's pushing off like steaming chlorine gas. It's just a chemical that is coming off of a reaction of two chemicals that are mixing. Substantial, as we'll see as we get through the run, but it is not, I don't want you to think it's coming out like a chlorine cylinder that just opened up. That's not the kind of quantity that they were involved in. All right, so some quick things about the chlorine. Your nose can pick up chlorine. The odor threshold, which is the technical term, is 0.08 parts per million. So if you ever needed to know what the odor threshold is, or hey, if I can, at what's the lowest point I can smell something, that physical property would be called the odor threshold, and that's how you would want to put that into the old Googler, is odor threshold. All right, the ceiling for chlorine, meaning that the most a worker can be exposed to unprotected, is 1 part per million. You don't want to go over that 1 part per million, and that's kind of important later on when we talk about reoccupancy. All right, and at about 15 parts per million, it is an irritant to your nasal passages and your eyes. You can start to get some feelings from it. So with that said, let's walk on to, we did the initial ticket. So they get on scene and the entry team starts to do a recon. This ended up being on the 4th floor, was where the actual reaction was taking place. And it was a 55-gallon drum in the pool mechanics room. So there was an indoor pool in this facility, and then in a separate location was the actual functioning units that house the pumps and the chemicals and all the different things to actually run the pool. And this mechanics room ended up being the story below the pool. So the pool was above on the 5th floor. This mechanics room turned out to be on the 4th floor of the high rise. When they walked in, they used the elevator, and they were using a Draeger XAM 6000 single gas meter upon entry. Because of the smell of the chlorine, not only did they bring their normal accompaniments of meters, but they also brought chlorine meters with them because the initial ticket said a chlorine smell. So that was their thought process behind bringing the Draeger XAM 7000. The XAM 5600. They also brought up with them a thermal imaging camera, which personally, I think for any kind of chemicals reacting, that's a really heads-up move. You should always be grabbing a thermal imaging camera if you can, for reasons that we'll get into in a little bit. When they entered, so they went into the elevator. They went up to the 4th floor. They got out into the hallway. That hallway was separated via door, so it was mechanically separated from the other part of the building, which housed, I guess, more of the service area of this building. So you were in kind of the commercial area, and then you walk into the service area, close a couple doors behind you, and you're in a hallway to the mechanics room. And that hallway also led to a set of stairs that went to the pool. So when they got into the service area, they said that they were getting about 30 parts per million in the service area. And when they went into the mechanics room on their chlorine meters. And then when they went into the mechanics room, it started off initially going to 50, and then it ended up peaking the meter. So They pretty much had a really good confirmation that this was, in fact, some kind of a chemical reaction that was emitting chlorine. At the same time that they are making entry, their science officer was interviewing the staff at the location, and that's when he found out that, yes, the pool people they knew they accidentally mixed muriatic acid with the sodium hypochlorite. Upon doing some research, he discovered that it does emit chlorine gas, like actual chlorine gas as the byproduct. So he relayed all that information to the officer, which is about the same time that they were kind of entering the room and looking around, which was nice because when they were able to do the recon, they were able to confirm, yes, we see the empty bucket of muriatic acid, we see the empty buckets of sodium hypochlorite. So things are now making sense. They're going back and they're double checking the story that they heard versus the story that they were told. And this is an important thing to do as you kind of run through any kind of a scenario. Is you're going to have information given to you, and you're always checking and confirming that information as many times as you can, whether that's through physically examining something, using your meters, using your understanding of chemical physical properties. You're always double checking the information that you think that you know. So heads up move on their part. They were able to determine that it was in fact muriatic acid and sodium hypochlorite. When they went into the mechanics room, they used a thermal imaging camera and they put it onto the 55-gallon drum, and they said they did see a rise in temperature greater than ambient. They said it was about 98, 99 degrees, and it never went above 100. So, they're inside a building. Buildings are usually about 75 degrees, so that was significantly higher than the ambient temperature, which, in case you're wondering why is that important, all right, that indicates that there is, in fact, a chemical reaction taking place. There is an endothermic reaction happening, and they did monitor this on a fairly regular basis. Now, one of three things can happen when you're looking at something over a period of time with your thermal imaging camera. One, the temperature can maintain the exact same temperature, all right? And the second would be that the temperature starts to drop. And the third would be that the temperature starts to rise. And all of these three things kind of give you an indication as to what is happening inside that drum. So if I start out and I put my thermal imaging camera on something and say it's 100 degrees, and then 2 minutes later I look at it again and it's 99 degrees, and then another few minutes later I look at it, it's 98 degrees, that indicates to me that there was a chemical reaction that took place. That chemical reaction is now over or rapidly diminishing, and it is no longer giving off more heat than it can give off to the atmosphere. So it's essentially cooling, right? So that reaction is starting to go on the tail end of its life. It's almost over, it's dying out, or it has died out, and now this product is cooling off. If my temperature is increasing, all right, that shows me that the chemical reaction is still taking place and possibly accelerating in its actual function. So more heat means more chemical reactions, right? Chemical reactions are driven sometimes by heat. You put more energy into the system, things are able to reach their activation energies a little bit easier, and they're able to move forward. So an increasing in your temperature tells you that the reaction is just starting to take place, or it's increasing in its rate of reaction because it's giving off more heat. Now, a flat line temperature, right, indicates that I have a reaction taking place, but the reaction is not accelerating. It's maintaining a constant equilibrium. All right, so there is reaction taking place. It's not becoming one reaction a second, then two reactions a second, then four reactions a second, then six. It's just a constant rate of reaction. So I have a constant release of energy. And the fact that it's only slightly above ambient temperature means that it is reacting, but it's not doing anything crazy. So that's good. That kind of indicates good stability. However, be careful when you have a stable temperature like that, because you can always get to the point where that temperature is 100 degrees for a little while, and then you're like, all right, it's been like 5 minutes, it's maintaining temperature, everything's good, but then at the 10-minute mark, it shoots up to 110. And now it starts to hit that parabolic like increase in temperature where I go from 100 for a really long time and then to 105, 110, 130, 160, 190. And then before you know it, it's out of control. So one of the things we always want to remember with thermal imaging cameras is that we have to keep a constant monitor on that product with the thermal imaging camera to really get a good idea of what's happening every couple of minutes by constant. I don't mean you have to have somebody sit there and watch it. All right. So a thermal imaging camera, they determined that there was, in fact, a chemical reaction going on. Well, when they looked in it, they figured they had about 15 gallons total product. Okay. And they were able to find the 5 gallons of muriatic acid and the 10 gallons of sodium hypochlorite. So that all seemed to go well. So that's what they essentially had. They're in a mechanics room. They're in a high-rise building. They have a chemical reaction taking place that is liberating a significant quantity of very toxic chlorine gas, whose the ceiling for this stuff is 1 part per million. It's not a joking around matter. This is serious. Now, what makes this so much different than other chemicals that have mixed in pools is that for the most part, a lot of these are outside. Or there's easy access to outside, right? I have something that happens in a mechanic room, at a pool, at a camp, or something along those lines, or even a residential neighborhood. I can take that product, I can bring it outside. Yes, it's reacting. Yes, it's producing some chlorine gas, but it's not confined. It dissipates relatively quickly. People can smell it from a ways away, but it doesn't have the ability to build up in concentration. With this run, that this company had, they were in a confined area. So they were getting a buildup of toxic chlorine gas well above the ideal H.
FLIR, a global leader in CBRE detection, announces a new version of the Identifinder R200 spectroscopic personal radiation detector that now detects and identifies neutrons in addition to gamma radiation. Neutrons penetrate material and travel far greater distances than any other form of radiation. A neutron detector has a better opportunity of detecting neutrons before any other associated type of radiation. This capacity provides an early warning to malicious material and provides a vital situational awareness to the user. This ruggedized, pager-sized detector can be mounted in a vehicle or worn for 24/7 radiation monitoring. While being worn, the Identifinder R200GN operates like a personal radiation detector, alarming when radiological hazards are detected. Responders can also use this device to perform isotope identification to help make safe and informed decisions. The Identifinder R200GN enables responders to determine whether a detection is a true threat or something a little more benign in nature. The R200GN uses the same Identifinder interface that responders have come to know, making it a seamless addition to the response toolkit. Find out more about the FLIR Identifinder R200GN by visiting www.flir.com/R200.
And I just want to put as a side note that they did, in fact, go in bunker gear and full SCBA. And when kind of questioned about this, I asked, I was like, well, why the bunker gear and SCBA? We hear chlorine gas and we immediately think a higher level of protection. They went in with pH strips on them. And their plan was if the pH paper were to change, then they would know that there was a skin irritation hazard at that point. But low levels of chlorine gas in the air, there's very little to worry about. So that they had a backup plan in case things got really bad to pull out, and they were going to use their pH paper as the generalized measurements. All right. Now, since they were also inside, they had a buildup of this chlorine gas. My initial question to them was, hey, did this have some kind of ventilation to it? And they thought the same thing as well. And the building did not have any kind of ventilation to the outside. So this was a high-rise building, fourth and fifth story, no way to ventilate easily to the outside. They would have had to ventilate down to the lobby through stairwells. That meant putting product into the stairwells that could have potentially gone to other parts of the building. So they were really in quite a pickle because here they have a drum that is producing a toxic gas, a very toxic gas, at pretty decent parts per million, enough to spike a meter, definitely way above the ideal H in a confined area, and they don't have anywhere to go with it. If they try to go down into the lobby to bring this out into the street, there was concern that bringing it out into the street in the middle of a city could produce results that they didn't want. They wouldn't want to put a product on the street that was releasing chlorine gas. And getting it through the lobby meant going through either a stairwell, which is connected to the rest of the building, or through a elevator, which is also connected through the rest of the building. And there was some talk back and forth about, if they were going through the elevator, how they could do that safely and effectively. But ultimately, above them was the pool. So then the other thought was, well, let's take these chemicals that are designed to be put in a pool. Let's put it into the pool, just like we would outside of many, many other chemicals. The pool area itself was relatively isolated from the rest of the building as far as ventilation was concerned. So the idea was, well, let's put it in the pool, and then we can attempt to ventilate from the pool area. When they were doing recon on the pool floor, they found that within a couple of doors and hallways, there was a recreation area that did in fact have a balcony outside. So they felt that they could then ventilate any of the stuff that would have come out of the pool. The idea behind the pool is that, yes, the products are still technically going to be together, but the fact that they are so diluted, you take 15 gallons of product and you dilute it in this was a 32,000 gallon pool. You basically put a tremendous amount of space between the chemicals. And so they are going to come together and react in a much, much, much slower fashion. There's going to be a much slower rate of reaction because you've essentially diluted both of them almost to the point that they're not going to react with each other very much. So when they sat and they weighed all their options between going through the stairwell, going through the building's stairwell and possibly exposing the building to chlorine gas, going through the elevator and possibly exposing the elevator to chlorine gas, or just bringing this up to a relatively isolated pool area and dumping the chemicals into the pool to stop the reaction, they went ahead and they opted for that route. The decision was then made to drop this 15 gallons into the pool and try to get the reaction to go under control, which they went ahead and they did. And a couple of interesting events happened during this. They tried to use a drum cart to secure the drum and bring it up the stairs. However, it did not fit on the stairs. So the decision was made to go ahead and try to bring this drum up by hand via stairs. And through that incident, one of the firefighters ended up getting their mask knocked off and ended up taking a little bit of a feed. So one of the lessons that they wanted to come across to this is to be careful when you're carrying things on the stairs. Things that may seem stable, just the slightest slip can, very easily knock your face piece off. That was definitely one of the takeaways that they wanted to come across. But they ended up getting this drum up the stairs into the pool. They dumped it into the pool. Now, when they did that, they filled, obviously, the pool area and the area adjoining the pool with the chlorine gas, which they knew was going to happen. And they had already set up a plan for ventilating this. Once they dumped the chlorine and the sodium hypochlorite, the muriatic acid and the sodium hypochlorite solution into the pool, the levels within the pool area started to rise and leveled off at around 50 parts per million right after they initially dumped it. So they set up a fan ventilation system. They pushed air from the pool area into the hallway, into the rec room, into the balcony, and they were able to create a relatively easy streamline as to not contaminate the rest of the building. So they basically negative pressure vented this out of the area and out of the building. It took approximately 3 hours from that point before the entire pool area was down below the steel of the 1 part per million, and they didn't allow reoccupancy into the area until it was at or about 0.5 parts per million. So a tremendous ventilation effort. They got these parts down to about 0.5 before they were able to move forward. Now, there was another thing that they were contemplating doing, and that was a neutralization. So one of the gentlemen had the thought process, hey, why don't we try to neutralize this, right? We have an acid, we have an oxidizer. What would happen if we tried to neutralize the acid? Would that actually stop the reaction? And the shorter answer is they didn't know. They weren't sure. And they weren't comfortable putting a base into this already reacting chemical to try to neutralize it, because they kind of felt like this was an oxidation reaction, not so much an acid-base issue. And if you are adding more chemicals to an already reacting product, I have a lot less control over what is happening. So they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to lose control. They didn't want to possibly mix something together that could have a catastrophic result. They wanted to maintain control over the entire scene, especially with it being inside of a building. So for this reason, they opted to not do any kind of neutralization, to actually dilute in a pool. And then the worst case scenario is that now the pool company has to deal with levels that are really, really, really out of whack. And if they really wanted to, they could just drain the pool and refill it. But at least the reaction would have stopped, and they didn't feel like it was their responsibility what happened to the pool. They just needed to mitigate the actual life threat, which was the chlorine gas being emitted by the chemical reaction. Some other issues that they had that they were able to overcome. There was a major communication problem between the command post and the entry teams because of the distance involved and the amount of concrete and cinder block between them. And what they ended up doing to overcome this was they actually just used cell phones. They ended up having better cell phone service than they did radio service. So the command post was briefed by the officer via cell phone. So that was, a relatively obvious but good call. You can't get communications one way. We have other means of communicating. So one of the things that this company likes to do is to come back from a run and spitball how things could have gone better, what may have been some other ideas. And they do this throughout the other A, B, C, and D shifts that are on. So they basically post what the run was to the other shifts, and they get ideas of what others may have done. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of do something like that for this. If you don't know, we do end up posting all of our show notes on the Hazmat Guys website. So if you have any thoughts or ideas on what you would have done or what you could have done, or ideas that you would have at least wanted to try and discuss about, head over to the website, jump onto this podcast, the show notes, and leave a comment about what you think may or may not have been able to work. And let's please keep this to be a civil discussion. We are not Monday morning quarterbacking. We are not saying that what anybody did was right or wrong. We are just spitballing other ways that things could have been done in hopes to learn from one another. So if you've had a run similar to this, your feedback would be greatly appreciated to the crew. And if you have not, then either way, jump on there, take a look at what other people have to say. Maybe somebody has an idea that's never had this run before. They're thinking outside of the box, and they have a home run idea. So until next time, folks, be safe out there. And remember, if you have an incident that you would like to have audio archived for others to learn off of for generations, feel free to reach out to us. You can come on the air, you can be on yourself, or I can interview you and do exactly what we did today.
If you have a moment, please head over to iTunes and leave us a positive review. And don't forget to check out the book, National Emergency Response Hazmat Drills, or NERD, on Amazon.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Hazmat Guys.
You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube channel at the Hazmat Guys. And take a moment to call our comment hotline at 843-628-1484 and go to www.thehazmatguys.com and sign up for the newsletter.
We seriously look forward to your feedback about any of the information provided, and we also want to hear about interesting incidents that you were a part of. So you can send us a note at feedback@thehazmatguys.com. And remember, any of the information that you share with us, if we put it on air, can always remain anonymous.
Remember, guys, don't just get on the job. Get into the job.